Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have an 8-game Major League Baseball slate. There's no weather issues today, so that's nice. This slate is actually shaped up to be pretty decent. We do have some good pitching, we do have some rough pitching, obviously, but we got good bats across the board, and we have value play across the board as well. So let's go and get into it. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? It helps the channel a lot. Let's go and get into it here. So we're going to start with our pitchers. We're going to start with Corbin Burns here for Milwaukee, as he draws really good metrics for this game. He has got a really good matchup here, and he's had 4 wins the last 6 starts with no games over 2 earned runs. His floor is around 15, but make no mistake, his ceiling is north over 35, and he's the best play on the slate at the pitching position, as he's got a great matchup here. Snell for the Padres is also in play, because he's been over 19 and 11 in the last 12 games. He has done that with a tough schedule too, and the Dodgers will be tough, but he does have some upside. The Dodgers bats are also somewhat avoidable here today, and he is in a good spot. He has given up 0 or 1 earned run in all but 1 game in this last 11 game or 12 game stretch he's had, so he's been extremely good. So we'll have to see here, but he's faced a pretty tough matchups here because he's faced Texas and Toronto, the Mets, San Francisco, Tampa Bay. He's managed to score fantasy points against all of them, so I think he's in an interesting spot here. Then we'll look at Kirby for Seattle. Now he's facing the Angels. He is very boom or bust. He's also a little bit overpriced, but he does have upside in this matchup, though he does feel risky. He's just been really inconsistent game to game. He'll have games where he's just dominating and scoring 35 to 40 fantasy points, and then other games where he just doesn't have it. Then we'll look at Maeda for Minnesota. Now, he's in an interesting spot here against Arizona. He's had 5 good games over the last 7 starts. This matchup is probably the second hardest in that stretch, but he is limiting the earned runs, and he has a decent K rate, so he's kind of a contrarian play, and is a little bit less expensive. Then we'll look at Kopech for the White Sox. Now, he has a interesting matchup here against Cleveland. He's faced them twice this season. Once was in the last game, and then once was early in the season. Earlier in the year, he scored 35 fantasy points against them. In his last game, he scored 4 fantasy points against them, which is a concern. But the K rate has also fallen away recently, which makes this a questionable situation. But he does have some capacity to do well, and so while he is up and down throughout the year, he has some interesting potential here. Though he does tend to give up some earned runs when he's not pitching very well. Then we'll look at Kyle Gibson for Baltimore. Now, he's in an interesting spot here against the Mets. I think a 15 fantasy point game is about what I expect here, but he's capable of slightly better if he can get some strikeouts as well. He's just been inconsistent throughout the year, and he does have some potential, though, for a good game, and he's a little bit cheaper. Then we'll look at Mats for St. Louis. Now, he's facing the easiest matchup on the slate against Colorado, and they're away from Colorado, which is also a benefit. He has had 4 games the last 5 starts over 19 fantasy points, and his K rate has been inconsistent, but he does carry a low floor. He's only $6,900, so that gives him some upside, and he has some potential here. Though it is high risk, high reward, because he otherwise has not been all that good. But again, he's a decent option, being a starter here. But he's had some good games, even against some average teams here, Cubs and Arizona and the White Sox. So I think this is an interesting spot for him to have a potentially solid game. So let's go ahead and get into our backs now. We have some good options across the board here, so let's start with our catchers. Adley Rutschman is my favorite play at this position, as he is hitting the ball very well lately. Though he's not hitting a ton of home runs, he does have that potential today. He draws good metrics for this matchup and has some upside in it. Then we'll look at William Contreras from Milwaukee. Now, he's a little bit pricey now, but that's because he's hitting the ball so well. He's been increasing his batting average, and he still has home run potential every time up. He's just managed to score fantasy points decently, so he's a little bit overpriced now, but he is viable on the slate. Then Wilson Contreras for St. Louis. He's also hit the ball very well recently. He's really improving on the season, and he's been a guy that tends to, play pretty well when in certain situations, and this is definitely one where I like his upside for home runs. And then we'll look at Francisco Alvarez for the Mets. Now, he has been up and down throughout the year. He's kind of a boom or bust play from a home run perspective, but he does have that potential today, so I do like his upside on this particular slate. In the first base, we'll look at Ohtani for the Angels. Now, he has just absolutely been insane lately with a 424 average over the last 10 games. He's also had 4 home runs and a couple of stolen bases, in fact. It's just pretty much crazy what he's doing right now. He's also just hitting home runs in bunches. This is a somewhat tough matchup for him, but he's definitely got the potential to have a good game here. Then we'll look at Goldschmidt, who I haven't really talked much about in a while, but he does draw some really great metrics here. He has been inconsistent, though. His batting average has been somewhat slumpy. He does have home run potential, and he's been really good against Colorado this season already. So I do like his upside, but again, like I said, he's been kind of slumpy lately, so he is a little bit of a concern. Ryan O'Hearn for the Baltimore Orioles is also in play here. He's been pretty solid this last couple weeks. He's not played a ton this season, but when he has drawn opportunity, he's been hitting the ball pretty well. I do like his upside in this matchup. He's not a huge home run threat, but he does have some of a home run threat, and he does have some good metrics for this game. If he does play today, then he'll be somebody that I'm going to try to work in my lineup at this position. Lamont Wade Jr. has also been very inconsistent lately, but he does have some good metrics here for a home run. He's hit the ball pretty well the last few games, and seems like he's gotten out of the funk that he was in, so I do like his upside in this matchup as a good contrarian play at this position. Maybe in second base, we'll look at Polanco from Minnesota. Now, he can play second or third base. He has been inconsistent, but Minnesota looks really good today. He also hit a home run in the last game, so it looks like he's been getting hits in the last couple games, so it looks like he might be getting back on track here. So I do like his upside in this matchup, and I think he's a great option on this slate. And he's not too expensive. But his teammate Julian from Minnesota is also in play. Now, he's been inconsistent throughout the season as well, but he does draw good home run metrics here, and he has had some good games recently. Though he has been somewhat inconsistent, he does draw good metrics for this game, and I like his upside. Kim for San Diego can play second or third base as well. He is absolutely hitting the ball extremely well with a 471 batting average over the last 10 games. He's also hitting home runs and getting a bunch of stolen bases, which is really helping his fantasy output, which is also causing his price to rise frantically. He hasn't been over 5,000 all year, I don't think, and so it's pretty crazy to see him this expensive. But he has been doing so much and so good that it's not too surprising to see his price come up, though he is in play as a result. Then we'll look at Dylan Moore for Seattle. Now, he's hit the ball very well recently with 4 home runs the last 10 games. He draws really good metrics for this game, and the way he's hitting right now, he's definitely in play, though he has been somewhat inconsistent. He does have a lot of zeros recently, but in the games he hits well, he does seem to hit a lot, and this is a game where he should have that opportunity again. He also can play an outfield. Gunnar Henderson is also in play for at third base. He can also play shortstop. He has been inconsistent throughout the season, but he does draw good metrics here, and I do think he's viable on the slate. He does have home run potential, but he's been somewhat inconsistent, as a batter. Arenado is in play for St. Louis as he draws great metrics here. He has been up and down throughout the season, but he occasionally starts to get hot, and then he have a string of games where he's really good, and in the last couple games he's finally starting to get hits again, so I think he's in a viable, good option today because of that situation. And then we'll look at Eugenio Suarez for Seattle. He looks like he's a really solid option today. And he's hit the ball against the Angels very well recently. Plus, he's been hitting the ball strong. He's had 2 home runs the last 10 games, and he does have some home run upside here. I really like his potential today as he's been hitting the ball very well. And he's even managed to score fantasy points in different ways. He is a core play for me as well today because of how he's been playing, so I do think he's viable on the slate. Then we'll look at Lindor for the Mets here. He has been very good recently, really raising his batting average after being kind of slumpy all season long. He also has good home run metrics, and he has been doing scoring fantasy points in lots of different ways, so that gives him some upside here. I do like his potential, and he even has some low-end stolen base upside. Then we'll look at Tommy Edman for St. Louis. Now, he can play in outfield as well, but he's hitting the ball pretty inconsistent throughout the year. But he does draw good metrics for this game, and he's one of the cheaper options at shortstop that actually makes some sense. Obviously, we have several guys that we can play multiple positions, and he's definitely one of them. So I do think he's viable on the slate, but he's not a must-play. Maybe in the outfielders, we're going to look at Tatis Jr. for San Diego. He draws good metrics here. He has been very inconsistent. He's kind of a home runner best guy right now, but he does draw good metrics for this game, and he has some home run upside here. Then we'll look at Julio Rodriguez for Seattle. Now, he has hit the ball very well recently. He's finally starting to hit pretty well this season. He's had some big games, and he's even managed to score good fantasy points without home runs. Though he's fairly expensive, he does, have a lot of upside with the home run potential, and I do like him as a great option on the slate. Corbin Carroll is also in play for Arizona, though he's been very inconsistent recently. He has home run upside, though, and that gives him some utility, though he has had some boomer bust situations. He's not scoring a ton of fantasy points when he doesn't hit a home run in the current last 10 games. Then we'll look at Brandon Nemo, who's still a little bit slightly overpriced, and he hasn't hit the ball as well lately as he's been trying to hit home runs more, I think, which he really just needs to get back to hitting the ball the way he normally does, which is pretty solidly. But he is in play today as he draw good metrics here against Gibson. Santander, for Baltimore has been really good throughout the season in certain situations, and he's had some stretches of really good games. Now, he had 2 straight games where he had 6 strikeouts total before today, but he has hit the ball pretty well recently. I do like his upside and home run potential in this matchup, and usually when he rises to the top of what I look at, that he tends to have a good game, so I like him a lot here. Toscar Hernandez is also in play. Now, he has been boomer bust all season long. He's a home runner bust guy. He doesn't tend to score a lot of fantasy points unless he hits a home run, though he did yesterday against the Angels, and so I look for him to have another possibly good game. I have liked him the last couple games as he's looked pretty decent. Then we'll look at Jock Peterson for San Francisco. Now, he faces a pretty good matchup here against Blackburn, and while he's been inconsistent throughout the season, he has home run metrics for this game, and I do think he draws really good opportunity here to have a solid game. Conforto for San Francisco also in play, as he's been pretty decent recently. If he draws a start today, he'll be somebody I would consider. If you want to go with the San Francisco stack, it's actually pretty easy to do because they're pretty cheap, but they are a little bit risky with this matchup. Then we'll look at Tyler O'Neill for St. Louis. Now, he has been inconsistent throughout the year, but he has hit the ball better recently, and I do like his upside in this matchup. This particular matchup just looks really good for me. I really think he's a great option today, and he is a core play, despite the fact he doesn't have a lot of home run options upside. He does have a little bit, but he's able to score fantasy points in lots of different ways. Then we'll look at Max Kepler, who's really hitting the ball good recently. He's finally starting to hit better than he was most of the season. He tends to have some decent home run upside as well, so he definitely draws good metrics here on this particular slate. My sub 3,000 guys are Dylan Moore for Seattle, Matt Wallner for Minnesota, who has been extremely inconsistent throughout the year, but he has hit 5 home runs in the last 10 games, and so as long as he has some home run upside, he's going to draw some interesting potential, being he's only $2,400. Ty France is also cheap at $3,000. He can fit in at first base, and he has hit the ball very well lately. He's not a huge home run threat most of the time, but he does draw good metrics for this particular situation. And then Willie Castro from Minnesota, also super cheap, and while he doesn't hit the ball perfectly, he has been getting a lot of steals lately, which is really helping his fantasy points, and with his price being so cheap, he gives you a lot of upside. So with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.